Good morrow to thee! Well met, good rogue! God give thee joy, though I see thou hast found the wine before the sermon. How now, friend, art awake, or is that thy soul leaving by a yawn? Hail and well met. Peace be with thee, though, if thou hast debts, may thy creditors know it not. A fair day to thee, and God's blessing on thee and all thy loud relations. Thou look'st well. What devilry hast thou been in? Look what the wind hath blown in a parliament of pickled pilgrims. Good morrow, or good even, or whatever cursed hour we pretend it be in this place, without sun nor sense of time. Welcome, welcome to this fine assembly, though methinks some among thee were lured more by curiosity than reverence, and mayhap by rumours of wine, which, I must confess, I do not furnish. Had I coin for such charity, I'd not be here, but nestled in a tavern, drowning genius in sack. I have long wished to summon thee hither, not from flattery, but that I might speak of mine own self. I do love the sound of my voice. 'Tis mellifluous, is it not? Now, ere we begin, first a matter of gentle peril. Are any among thee of noble rank, a duke, a duchess, some baron hiding amongst the groundlings? Or, perhap, a lawyer? If so, I beg pardon in advance for my coarse tongue, and shall address thee with all the civility I can counterfeit. I merely speak of those belonging to my time. Raise thy hand, and I shall do my utmost to pretend thou art not here. Unless thou art the sort who loveth a jest, then I shall mock thee with double favour. Perchance thou expected me to be apparelled in the finery of mine own day, a ruff about my neck fit to strangle a bishop, and doublet stiff as a sermon. But hark! Thine own fashions, strange though they be, are wondrous, full of comfort, yea, exceedingly so. I did but don a pair of thy breeches, and methought I'd been swaddled by angels. Very well, let us proceed with all the dignity the moment alloweth, which is to say, none whatsoever. To the beginning of things, though, I shall not tarry there o'er long, lest we all do nod off and wake only at the end of the evening's revelry. Some do say I was born upon the 26th day of April, in the year of our Lord 1564. I, barely being present at the time, cannot rightly say. What I do know verily, what the parish register doth showeth, is that I was baptized on the 29th, and unless I was christened straight from the womb, I imagine I drew breath some days prior. As every mother knows, birth and baptism are not the self-same thing. My mother, Mary Arden, a sensible woman, when sober, did swear it was the 23rd day, or near enough. Her memory was like a sieve, with a fondness for gossip and embroidery. She could not recall what she ate for supper, but could recount the scandal of who kissed whom behind the bakehouse 10 winters past. I was the eldest living child, though not the first to answer the roll. 2 fair daughters went before me. Poor babes, and heaven rest them! After me came 5 more, 3 brothers, 2 sisters, all making such a din in that household as might fright a pack of dogs. 'Twas like living inside a festival, with none of the food and all the noise. A man could not hear his own thoughts for the weeping of infants and the flatulence of uncles. But enough of my family. I shall not burden thee with tales of cousins thrice removed, aunts of curious beard, or a father who sold gloves by day and tails by night. I see many a scholar hath already done so, though most of them invented half of what they writ, and borrowed the rest from each other. I myself did read one such account, and knew not the fellow they described, a man of noble bearing and fluent Latin. I laughed so hard I near drowned in mine own ale. Now to Stratford. O sweet Stratford upon the Avon, now be it called a cradle of genius, a place where every brick now whispereth, here Shakespeare did trod, though most of 'em were laid after I was safely buried. Mark me well, if I did not pen the plays, Then all the inns and gift shops of my home are built upon a monstrous fraud, and I do pity the poor innkeeper whose sign doth read, Shakespeare drank here, when, in truth, I most oft drank at home. But onward, let us quit the cradle and turn to that cradle of ambition, London, where players strut, pickpockets flourish, and critics sharpen their quills like surgeons. 'Twas there I made my mark, or at least smudged the parchment a little. Ah, London, thou great sprawling beast of stone and smoke, smelling of fish, ambition, and treachery in near equal measure. I knew thee well. To that wondrous den of thieves, poets, and pickpockets came I young, lean, and emptier of purse than a drunkard's bottle at sunrise. How I came thither matters not, whether by foot, by cart, or clinging like a barnacle to the tailboard of some poor player's wagon, come I did, with more ink on my fingers than bread in my belly, and more rhymes in my head than wit to govern them. Fame, thou say'st? I sought it not. What I sought was a crust of bread, a cup, a trade that would have me. I knocked at many doors where men of letters did huddle, thrusting my poor scrawlings at them like a peddler his wilted cabbage. Some laughed outright. One told me to go boil my codpiece. Others, bless their patient souls, did listen, though whether in pity or confusion I ne'er did know. Soon enough I fell in among a company of players, rogues, rascals, drunkards, dreamers, and some that were all four before breakfast. My people, a finer gaggle of godless souls I ne'er did know, nor ever shall again. 'Twas with those merry knaves I learned the sacred trade, how to be someone else entirely for the price of a penny, and sometimes for free if the constable came too soon. I set my hand to penning plays. I stole, and proudly, from Greeks, from Romans, from Frenchmen too, and once or twice from the fellow snoring beside me at the alehouse. A good jest is a jest no matter whence it comes. As I oft say, a stolen jewel shineth just as bright, especially if thou art quick enough to run with it. Mark me well, plays are not plucked from trees like apples. Nay, they are hammered on anvils of sweat and curses, patched with threadbare plots, scrawled upon by candle's end, and borne through more shouting at actors than prayers. And when at last the thing is done, half the players forget their lines, and the other half fall through the trapdoor. And yet, oh, those were golden days. The theatre did thrive, the plague did not always, and Her Majesty, God save her, sat aloft in her gilded box, smiling or frowning as her mood did lean, but always, always paying in full. Let none say the crown short-changed this playwright. But soft I wander, as actors do when the prompter sleeps, or the wine hath been too free. Another time, dear hearts, we shall speak of rivals, rogues, and those scoundrels who claim my words but never my labour. For now I bow to thee, and pray, if thou laugh, let it be loud, and if thou must throw something, let it be coin. And now we set our gaze upon those mighty lords of ink with whom I did quarrel, carouse, and on more than one occasion wrestle in an alley less noble than the quarrel that brought us there. A fellowship of scribblers, gallants, debtors, and cracked philosophers, each armed with a pen, a tankard, and an insult half-rhymed. First, to Marlowe Christopher, with a soul of flame and boots of thunder. Kit, we called him. His tongue was keener than his dagger, and both were ever loose. He words, in the mouth of Edward Allen, strode the stage like a colossus. Poor Kit, he met his end in a tavern fray, stabbed, they say, over a bill, or a woman, or a wink too many. The tale shifts with the drink, but truth or no, I mourned him. And I confess, I filched a thunderclap or two from Tamburlaine when he was past noticing. Next was Ben Jonson, stubborn Ben, brawling Ben, Big Ben, a man whose wit was thick as his skull, and whose skull was thick as any London fog. He loved his own verse so well he near married it. He called me a thief of languages, and I named him a bombast barber unburdened of shears. Yet between our jests and jars of sack, a fondness grew, like mold on bread, unwanted, but persistent. Then comes one, Thomas Dekker, that sweet-natured ragamuffin who could pen a sermon for beggars and a love-note for queens. He owed money to half the city, and charmed the rest. Thomas Middleton, with ink as black as his humour. He wrote comedies that made the devil blush, and tragedies with plots knotted like a fishwife's net. George Chapman, who deemed himself Homer's heir, though his Greek was but a bold assault upon the tongue. Still, his words thundered, and when sober, he made sense at least twice a fortnight. Robert Greene, God rest him, who called me an upstart crow and then promptly died, perchance of envy. He had wit, though he spent it faster than his coin, and his ghost still scribbles complaints in the footnotes of others. Anthony Munday, the mask-maker general, whose verses smelled of rosewater and royal favour. I ne'er met a man so skilled at getting paid for poetry that no one could remember. And now Thomas Kyd, I, Master Kyd, who gave us Ghosts, Revenge, and Mothers Slain mid-monologue. His Spanish tragedy dripped with blood and howls and fathers mad with grief. 'Twas said he kept a skull at his desk for study or inspiration, I know not. He taught us all how to kill prettily, and though he vanished from the stage too soon, his echo lingers in every blade unsheathed on page or playhouse floor. We all stole, we jested, we fought, and from time to time we even wrote, and sometimes together. Thus was the golden age of English letters built not by wisdom alone, but by drunken passion, borrowed plots, unpaid debts, and a most dangerous love of ink. I do not exist alone. Lend thine ears, sweet rogues and noble loafers, for I shall tell thee now of that most rickety miracle, the Globe Theatre, my beloved, unruly, soot-blown temple of art and nonsense. When we lost the lease to our old playhouse, the theatre, a most original name dost thou think, did we weep and rend our doublets. Nay, we took the boards, the beams, the very nails from it. Aye, we stole the playhouse entire by moonlight, in deepest frost, and with more ale than good sense. I do confess, none were sober, few were skilled, and all were loud. We did ferry the timbers across the Thames on barges that groaned like an old widow's knees. No, the river was not frozen, I know, for I near fell in twice, and the Thames hath no mercy for dramatists. A cartwheel snapped, Burbage tripped on a plank, and I, trying to steady the load, got a splinter so deep it near wrote its own sonnet. But from that glorious thievery we raised a new house in Southwark, the Globe, round, proud, and open to the wrath of heaven. Part theatre, part tavern, part bear pit, part miracle. There, dear friends, did miracles and mishaps abound. A juggler once dropped a torch mid-scene, 'twas Julius Caesar, and lit the hem of Cassius's tunic. Brutus, ever quick, doused him with a flagon of ale, and called it Roman custom. Once, during a Midsummer Night's Dream, a donkey meant to bray fled the stage and chased a merchant through the stalls. We called it a bold reimagining. The groundlings, bless their fragrant hearts, did hurl all manner of fruit, apples, nuts, once a half-eaten pie. I took a turn as Adam in As You Like It, and was struck clean in the breeches with an orange. The audience applauded. I bowed. The orange stayed. Ah, but the glories! There did Romeo woo Juliet in sighs sweet as sugared wine. There did Hamlet hold poor Yorick's skull aloft and speak of death, whilst the skull itself belonged, we suspect, to a man named Walter who had owed the theatre sixpence and never paid. There did Falstaff fall thrice in one scene, not by design, but by clumsiness, and still the people cheered. And I trod the boards now and then. I played kings, ghosts, and once, against my better judgment, a nurse in Titus Andronicus. The less said, the better. The globe was no palace, nor was it safe from fate. One fine day, during Henry VIII, we fired a cannon for flourish, and lo, the roof caught fire as though insulted by history. The place burnt down faster than a queue-line in a storm. None perished, praise the saints, though a man's breeches caught alight and were extinguished with a jug of sack. Yet the globe rose again, like a phoenix or an actor who will not exit, though thrice prompted it returned, rebuilt, fairer and sounder, and with a roof less inclined to ignite, a house of kings, knaves, spirits, and thunder. A place where muses danced, and drunkards sang, where jesters wept, and tyrants died daily. So raise thy cup, in memory of madness, for the globe was not just timber and stage, it was a world entire, made of dreams, dust, and more than a little ale. And so let us return to London. Sweet, stinking, roaring, scheming London. Never was there a place so foul and yet so fair, so wretched and yet so wondrous, a city where vice doth walk arm in arm with virtue, and oft doth steal her purse, her necklace, and said virtue, whilst she smiles and curtsies. The streets, thou must know, were more narrow than a miser's charity, and twisted more than a lawyer's tongue. Full many a brave soul did set out from Cheapside with firm intent, only to vanish like a coin in a magician's hand, swallowed by some crooked alley, misled by a wench with clever fingers, or simply consumed by the philosophical need for ale at every third door. As for the smells, oh, the smells! Roast meats and privy waste did wrestle in the air like two drunkards at a christening, and methinks the waste most oft had the better hand. If thou walk'st through London without a kerchief pressed firm to thy nose, then either thou art blessedly insensible, or already dead and unaware of it. The gutters flowed, not with milk and honey, but with all manner of noisome offerings, fish heads, cabbage leaves, old shoes, dead cats, drunkards, and, on unlucky days, a rhymester floating face down beside his own verse, most of which, if read, might explain his fate. Worse still were the windows above, where the mistress of the house, having cried no more warning than "Gardez-le," would upend her chamber pot upon the heads of the unwary. A man might leave his dwelling a courtly gentleman only to arrive at his destination looking like a scarecrow that had lost a brawl with a thunderstorm. Yet for all such peril, London thrived. Merchants hawked their wares with such ferocity that, if thy purse escaped unlightened, 'twas accounted a miracle or a sign of witchcraft. Bakers, butchers, blacksmiths, brewers, fiddlers, gamblers, pickpockets, mummers, mountebanks, matchmakers, and madmen all clamoured for thy coin, thy custom, or thy very soul. And sometimes all three by the quarter hour. The Thames itself, that broad and brimming artery of the city, was alive with barges, wherries, skiffs, and watermen cursing one another in verse so foul and florid it might make a pirate blush or a bishop faint. And lo, the people, from silk-gowned lords to barefoot urchins, from Spanish grandees to Dutch traders, from ladies fair as the dawn to ladies who, by night, were less fair but more enthusiastic. All mingled together a stew of mankind, bubbling, steaming, and seasoned with hopeful sin and a touch of rotten herring. The law, I tell thee, was oft spoken of and seldom obeyed. A man might hang for pinching a loaf, whilst another bought off a murder with a sack of gold and a well-placed wink to a sleepy magistrate. Justice, in truth, did wear a blindfold, but also kept one eye half-peaked beneath it. The blindfold oft keep her more blind to the law than those breaking it, and yet Despite the stench, the rats, the pox, the pickpockets, the privy wives, and the perils of airborne stew, there was such life, such noise, such music, and misrule, and dreaming, that even the fleas seemed merry. 'Twas in this mad, merry bedlam that the theatre did take root and bloom like a rose that, despite being planted in dung, refuseth to be anything but lovely. Poets, actors, and playwrights moved among the crowd, elbowing fishwives and dodging night soil with the same grace they later used to dodge creditors, critics, and unwanted children. Verily, good friends, to live in London was to risk much, but to live elsewhere was to miss the very marrow of life itself. I must now lift mine eyes and thine to that glittering star that once did rule o'er England, Queen Elizabeth, Gloriana herself, whose smile could warm the heart of winter, and whose frown could chill a man faster than the grave. She was, in sooth, a marvel, a queen with a wit sharp as a tailor's needle, and a tongue sharp as the tailor's shears. Daughter to King Harry the Eighth, who lost wives as oft as a drunkard loseth wagers, and to Anne Boleyn, who poor lady lost her head for daring to bear a clever daughter instead of a dull-eyed prince. And see what came of it? Crowned in a time when England had more trouble than a baited bear, she rose like a phoenix, though with less ash and more lace, and dazzled both friend and foe alike. Never was there a monarch more skilled at smiling sweetly whilst sliding a dagger twixt an envoy's ribs, metaphorically, of course. Though now and then, methinks, the dagger was not wholly imaginary. She kept no husband, and wisely so, for England was her spouse, and Parliament her squabbling brood of unruly children, ever crying for coin and sucking at the teat of royal favour. Many a king and princeling did offer hand with undying love, and she did lead them all on a merry dance, saying, "Mayhap, dear sir, but not to-day." Some danced until their bones creaked, and still she curtsied, and smiled and wed no man but the realm. Her court was a festival of splendour, ruffs wide as windmill sails, sleeves broad enough to hide 2 conspirators and a Jesuit besides, and so much perfume adrift in the air that a man might swoon ere he reached the privy. Yet woe betide the courtier who thought her soft. Elizabeth could scold a duke into blubbering, and raise a stable boy to knighthood all within the same breath. Her memory was long, her grudges longer, and her forgiveness shorter than a summer's day in Yorkshire. Under her golden rule, England did flourish. Trade did blossom, poets did scribble, sailors did plunder, and the theatres, oh, my home, grew fat and merry, when not shuttered for plague or Puritan displeasure. She loved a good play, God bless her, and a jest too, provided it aimed not too near her royal person. One fool did once jest at her age, and was afterward seen jesting in the Tower, where laughter goeth in, but seldom cometh out. And of the Armada, that great Spanish boast of floating wood and wounded pride, she faced it with the spirit of a lioness denied her supper. One speech from her, and the soldiers' spines did stiffen, and, I warrant, half of Spain's bowels did loosen in reply. Thus ruled Elizabeth, with a laugh upon her lips, a sceptre in her hand, and a subtle dagger ever tucked in her sleeve. A golden age, men do call it now, and truly it was. Though, like all things golden, 'twas heavy, and hard, and not easily bent to another's will, a toast to dear Bess. No other was like her, nor ever shall be. Now picture, if thou canst, a humble fellow with ink-stained fingers, breeches 2 weeks past washing, and a head full of unruly rhymes that refused to pay rent. Such was I when first Her Majesty's mighty shadow passed o'er my quill, and very nearly blotted it out. At the time, poets were not held in the loftiest regard. We were thought little better than cut-purses with verse. And to be fair, many of us were cut-purses with verse, I knew a man who could rhyme purse with curse and worse, all while robbing thee blind, a not-so-rare talent. If thy play did not please, thy purse would surely suffer, and if it did please, thy actors would drink the profits, misplace the props, and marry the barmaid before the day returneth. But then came her grace, Elizabeth Regina, patroness of players, scourge of bad verse, and lover of good jests. She did cast her eye upon the theatre with curious favour, saying, Let them play. I have need of laughter and spies. For verily, much of our company doubled as informers, a most profitable second trade for men skilled in pretending. We acted well upon the stage, and better still, in the alleys. Now I, being but a lad from Stratford, with more ambition than sense and more debt than shoes, did scrawl my first plays in the hope that some noble's cousin's cousin might declare, This fellow scribbles not too terribly. Let us throw him a coin, or at least a crust. Imagine my surprise when 'twas not a cousin, nor a cousin's cousin, but the Queen herself, who bid our company to court. Word came down like thunder wrapped in lace. Her Majesty desireth a comedy. Make it merry, make it sharp, make it quick. You have 3 days. 3 days, quoth I? That's not time enough to sober an actor, let alone write a whole play. Yet write I did, quill flying like a sparrow with its tail afire. I hurled words upon parchment with such frenzy that the inkpot did beg for mercy. Her Majesty watched from her box with that unsearchable smile, the kind that might mean delight or imminent beheading. We played A Midsummer Night's Dream, and when it ended, she did clap. Once, a single, regal clap. The room froze. Time stopped. My bowels considered their options. Then she laughed. Oh, saints and spirits, what joy! For when the Queen laughed, the court laughed. When the court laughed, the nobles paid. And when the nobles paid, the players drank. Thus was the sacred cycle restored. From that day, my fortunes rose swifter than portly Falstaff after a free dinner. Her Majesty did not praise me often, but when she did, the words clanged like coins in the soul. Master Shakespeare, thou hast pleased me. And friends, let me tell thee, that is better than any judgment set to print by a great learned fool, and far safer than displeasing her, which oft meant exile, ruin, or a sudden accident involving stairs, rooftops, or inconvenient swordplay. Thus did her favour shelter me from ruin, raise me from vagabond to respected rogue, and turn my poor scribblings into royal pastime. May God bless her sharp tongue and all, and may she rest in peace, if peace may be found after hearing my Merry Wives of Windsor 3 times. Now picture me thus, seated at my desk, tankard near at hand, my points untrussed for comfort, when all at once a messenger bursts through the door like a storm with legs.
Master Shakespeare, quoth he, wheezing like a spaniel in fevered pitch, Her Majesty doth require a play.
A play, quoth I, blinking through crust and hangover. Then let her take one from the pile. There's 3 in draught, and 2 that look respectable by candlelight. Nay, sir, saith he, trembling, not just any play, a play with Falstaff. Falstaff, quoth I, still chewing bread both stale and ale-soaked. That rogue I slew in Henry V, the walking wine-sack? The man built like a meat-pie in breeches? Ay, saith he, pale as parchment, but the Queen would have him in love. In love? Quoth I, near choking on mine own disbelief. Falstaff? That mountain of man-flesh? That heap of sack and scandal, he hath not seen his toes since good Queen Bess was a maid. But 'twas true. Queen Elizabeth, bless her royal mischief, had taken such delight in Sir John's lies and lard that she commanded he return, not to war, but to wooing. Love, said she, let the rogue suffer for once. Let the gasping knave pant after skirts not his own. Now when the queen commandeth, thou hast but two choices, write with haste, or die with ceremony. So I cast aside my morning crust, snatched up my quill, and began to scribble like a man beset by demons, debtors, and deadlines. Some say I had a fortnight, others say a week. I say I had no time at all, for time itself did flee me in terror. What tale did I brew? A merry thing, a mad thing, a tale of Falstaff, bold as brass, broad as a barn door, thrice as round, who thinketh himself God's gift to women, when in truth his gift is to break furniture. He wooed not one, but two wives, Mistress Page and Mistress Ford, both wise, wicked, and entirely unimpressed. They led him a chase, they did, hid him in hampers, doused him with filth, and at last dressed him as a horned beast to fright the very buttons off his hose. Never wrote I so fast, my ink flowed swifter than the Thames in flood. My copyist wept writing the cue scripts. My actors cursed learning their lines. The man who brought me supper hath not been seen since. 'Twas not writing, 'twas exorcism. Yet perform it we did, and lo, the queen laughed. Saints preserve us! She did. Not the dainty titter of monarchs, but a full-bellied roar that near shook the rafters. I thought she might expire then and there, slain by merriment. And thus was the Merry Wives of Windsor born, not of muse or moon, but of panic, fear, and her Majesty's unrelenting fancy. Let it be writ, never was a knight so roundly humiliated as poor Sir John, and never was a writer so gladly relieved when her Grace pronounced it a right pleasing jest. Now mock me well. When the black breath of plague once more o'ertook our fair London, 'twas as if the very devil had been let loose upon the town, though truth be told, London had devils aplenty already, most in doublets and debt. At first 'twas but whispers, a cough here, a faint there, a man sneezing, and the crowd parting like the Red Sea. Then came the dread red-daubed crosses upon doors, the ringing of bells without ceasing, and the pitiful cry in the streets, "Bring out your dead." And what think ye was the very first command to come down from on high? Was it, "Save the poor players"? Nay, 'twas, "Close the playhouses, and let the theatres gather dust like a miser's purse." Thus were we ousted from our boards like fleas from a dying dog. No more did Falstaff bellow, nor Hamlet brood, nor witches cackle, nor lovers pine, nor kings strut and misquote the stars. No more did groundlings roar with laughter, or hurl turnips when the jest fell flat. Theatres were padlocked tighter than a nun's virtue, and thrice as guarded. And the good citizens of London, having naught to do but sicken or survive, did look upon us players as little better than fleas ourselves. What was left to us, think ye? We could not stay in London, lest we be eaten by rats or creditors, both equally ravenous. Though the rats, I dare say, had better manners. Nay, we took to the open road. A sorry sight we were, a troop of weary souls, bundled in cloaks patched more oft than a parson's sermon book, hauling carts heavy with costumes, stage swords, and a fair assortment of unpaid tavern bills. We wandered from town to town like peddlers of dreams, offering comedies in cow pastures and tragedies in tavern yards. Our stage was oft a cartwheel broken in twain, our curtain a borrowed bedsheet, still warm from the bed, and our audience a curious mix of farmers, drunkards, chickens, and the occasional confused sheep. Sometimes we played in grand manor halls, where the ladies clutched their pearls and the lords clutched their purses, and both clutched their noses if the clown's breeches had not been washed. Other times we played before barns, where our only applause was the snorting of cattle, or worse, silence, broken only by a goat with digestion most impolite. Rain soaked us, mud embraced us, Fleas adopted us and named us kin. And oh, the merry hazards of the road! One night an ox did wander onto the stage in the midst of Julius Caesar, and nearly made Cassius into a martyr thrice over. Another time, during Romeo and Juliet, a great mastiff did mistake poor Juliet's swoon for a game, and dragged her bodily from the scene, much to the delight of the audience and the dismay of the actor, who was, in truth, the stoutest lad among us, and most unconvincing in a corset. Yet for all the miseries, 'twas a life of freedom and mad merriment. For in those green fields and dusty lanes we found again what London oft made us forget, that the heart of theatre is not in gilded halls or velvet-clad dukes, but in the simple telling of tales before those who hunger for wonder. And when at last the plague loosed its grip, and London beckoned us home with open gates, open purses, and still the occasional open sewer, we returned battered but unbowed, richer in spirit, if not in purse, and full of songs, bruises, and tales enough to fill a dozen comedies. Thus the theatre did not die. It merely went walking a while, with muddy boots, flea-bitten sleeves, and laughter still in its belly, and lo! When we returned, the boards of the globe did tremble once more beneath kings and clowns, while the bells rang out, not for the dead, but for life renewed.